Welcome to the world of BitLovin. Let's dive in. Hey, thanks for the comment. So I've heard estimates thrown out that there are something like 20% of all Bitcoin is lost. And that means that people have lost the private keys. Nobody has access to be able to retrieve those private keys. Nobody knows those. And so those Bitcoin can't move and essentially can be considered burned or lost, that nobody's going to get. And in the short term, what that does is it boosts the price of Bitcoin than what it would be if those were able to be moved. Because if you have somebody who, like the person who lost their private keys on a thumb drive in some, British landfill, and they want to dig up the landfill and try to find it because it's worth $1 billion now. That $1 billion would probably enter, the person would probably sell it if he was able to find it. And so that would drive the price down because you'd have more supply on the market. And so with demand staying the same, the price would go down. Now, in the long run, people might think that, okay, we might run into an issue of there just not being enough Bitcoin to spread among the people of the world. However, I'll remind people that Bitcoin is divisible. Right now, the total supply, not right now, forever, the total supply of Bitcoin is 21 million. However, each Bitcoin is able to be divided into Satoshis, and 100 million Satoshis goes into one Bitcoin. And so in terms of divisibility, we're talking 2.1 quadrillion units of money that can be used. And on top of that level of divisibility, there's the Lightning Network, which right now has the ability for millisats, so 1,000th of a sat. So 1,000 millisats go into one sat. So divisibility is not an issue when it comes to Bitcoin. Now, to kind of play this out even further, eventually, I think a lot of people in the Bitcoin space and people who just follow tech generally and kind of see the trend of human technology, it's conceivable that quantum computing would be able to eventually mine those coins. So the idea is that typically these are older lost coins that are in non-quantum safe addresses. And so just by the nature of those addresses, the public key is already known, so that the private key can just be worked on trying to derive it. And to kind of go back a little bit further, what quantum computers essentially are thought to be able to do is because they can kind of, let's just say, just do a lot of calculations in a very short amount of time. And the whole thing about cryptography is that to put the chance of finding somebody's private key by just knowing their public key as one in trying to find one atom in the entire universe, finding a specific atom in the entire universe. And that is obviously just mind-blowing numbers that would take any ordinary computer billions of years to figure out. A quantum computer supposedly would be able to figure this out within 10 minutes, because that would be the or not even necessarily 10 minutes. If it's the, you're trying to mine I should say steal, because it's steal Bitcoin from an address that already has a public key available, then you would be able to work on that for weeks potentially as a quantum computer thief. Now, if there was a rare scenario or a very unlikely scenario where this was a process that was able to happen very cheaply on the quantum computer side, and they'd be able to attack, and it'd be able to take all the coins basically, this first of all would take a lot of time, and it would be something that would not be able to be done like that. But let's say it would be able to be done like that. They would be introducing a whole bunch of supply to the market, driving the price down. As long as Bitcoin continues to enforce its fixed supply and churn out blocks every 10 minutes, Bitcoin will recover. And Bitcoin is the type of thing where if whatever it is doesn't kill it, Bitcoin becomes stronger because of it. And so I do think that Bitcoiners will adopt some sort of quantum resistant address before quantum is ever a threat. And because, first of all, we're incentivized to do that. So there's plenty of attention being paid to this topic. And it's just a matter of like what has the least amount of trade-offs. And so I think what's ending up going to happen with that, to not just turn this into a quantum post, but I think that eventually people will have the option of moving their Bitcoin to a quantum resistant address, or even not necessarily moving it, but if setting up a condition where if somebody tries to steal their Bitcoin with a quantum computer, that it would automatically go to a quantum resistant address. So the person would not need to take a step unless their Bitcoin was being stolen. Those are fantastic options in my mind, because it doesn't force you or force anybody else to move their Bitcoin. It would just create an option, or kind of like a safety net for people to be able to not have to worry about their Bitcoin being stolen. But yeah, to go back to the subject of lost keys or lost coins, or you can even think of it as like a hack too. Traditionally, in the history of Bitcoin, those have led to major downturns in the price of Bitcoin. However, you would think that it would get people to say, wait, I should hold my own keys so I'm not reliant on an institution, so I'm not reliant on an exchange to hold them for me. I should do it myself. And that would pull a lot of Bitcoin off of the exchanges, driving the price up, because there's essentially a demand squeeze and essentially a run on the exchanges. Now, that doesn't happen because people, at least at this point in Bitcoin's adoption, get scared and they say, this is a risky asset, I'm going to take a step away. However, the more we go down the road of just Bitcoin's thesis playing out, which is that governments will continue to print money and runaway inflation and all those reasons why people own Bitcoin, that will change the mindset of people of being like, I have nowhere else to run. I will pull this Bitcoin off an exchange and hold it myself, because going into dollars is not a good option for me. So hopefully, not hopefully, but as time goes on, I would imagine the response to lost keys or hacks or any sort of fraud, things like that where people thought there was more Bitcoin than there actually is, will turn into people actually running from the institutions into self-custody, which is fantastic for Bitcoin. So I think a lot of people in the Bitcoin space will often say like everything's good for Bitcoin. Hopefully after walking through the steps and being able to see how like resilience is built and the incentives that are aligned, you can see how Bitcoin actually benefits from these things. So it's not just saying the meme that everything's good for Bitcoin, but in this case, it's hard not to see Bitcoin benefiting in the long run from people holding Bitcoin themselves. One thing that people have a hard time wrapping their head around is that value isn't something that just exists as like a definitive, objective thing that has value. Value is and has always been subjective. A lot of people will look at Bitcoin and say, it is 100% speculation, 0% value. You have just told me, when you say that, you've told me what you see Bitcoin's value as. You are not accounting for everybody else and how they see Bitcoin's value. And so there might be people who agree with you. However, there are people there who see value in a stateless, decentralized, censorship-resistant money. These are people who are living in tough situations, like the people in Iran right now, who are dealing with hyperinflation with the fiat currency that is local to them. And Bitcoin is a lifeboat for those people. It's a lifeboat for people who are stuck on the hamster wheel, that went to college and trying to do the right thing and struggle either holding a job, getting a job, and having a salary that keeps up with inflation. And you're not able to save because you have you can't buy a house, and that's basically like the way that we've been told we need to be able to save is by actually owning a house. And that's out of reach at this point. And so what can you actually afford to do? Well, hopefully you can afford $10, maybe a week or a month, just being able to stack Bitcoin. That is something that is very accessible to people. And once you have enough Bitcoin saved up on an exchange, you move it into self-custody, and now you have ownership of something that cannot be taken away from you if you're holding it properly. It's able to be that long-term savings for you where 10 years down the road, you'll look at it and you will have actually saved something. You will not have to worry about, did the dollar go down significantly in value that I've been saving, and now my savings is worth less. In fact, you should outpace the dollar significantly. There are various reasons that I go into, in many of the videos that I have, but to bring it back to the point that value is something that the individual decides. If I give this example a lot, but what value is a bottle of water? Obviously, like, we look around and it's got a whole bunch of different prices depending on your location. If you're, in a sports arena or something like that, it's going to be a lot more expensive than if it's, outside the sports arena. Just context matters, but also even within the individual. If I am like fully hydrated, I'm probably only willing to spend like $1 on a bottle, or I will pay not to have to carry a bottle around, or if I haven't had water in 3 days, I'm willing to spend $100, like more than I would be willing to spend on diamonds if it's like about life and death. Like, when it comes to value is subjective, and the individual doesn't even know what they actually value, like the level to which they value something, until they actually take the action to buy it. And so that is why prices are reflective of the market and how the market looks and values a thing, but it in no way tells an individual what they actually value. And the individual can't even just verbally say what they value. It is only with action of actually paying for something and giving up their time and energy, which is their money, and actually paying for something that they essentially cast their vote of what the value of that thing is. That ends up becoming feedback for the seller to either increase the supply or decrease the supply, depending on how much the market values. And so bringing it back there, just because you see something as 100% speculative, that is not how value is determined. Value is determined on the individual level after they've taken action. Thank you for checking out this episode of BitLovin. For more educational content like this, be sure to like and subscribe, and you can find all my links in the show notes.